The massive alien ship appeared without warning near Earth's moon. It was 3 times bigger than any human vessel ever built, with smooth silver walls that seemed to glow with their own light. The ship looked like a giant crystal floating in space, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the orbital station New Horizon, watching the alien vessel through the main view screen. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating fast. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about and feared for decades. First contact with an alien race. "Sir, they're sending a message," reported Lieutenant Danny Hayes from the communications station. The young pilot looked nervous but excited. "It's in perfect English." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at an alien face. The creature had pale blue skin, large dark eyes, and a tall, thin body. It wore what looked like a military uniform covered in strange symbols. "Greetings, people of Earth," the alien said in a voice that sounded like music. "I am Ambassador Zektar of the Valorian Empire. We represent the Galactic Confederation, a union of 47 star systems. We come in peace to welcome you to the larger galaxy." Jake stepped forward. "Ambassador Zektar, I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. We're honored to meet you." He tried to keep his voice calm and professional, even though his mind was racing with questions. "We wish to meet with your leaders," Zektar continued. "We have much to discuss about your planet's future place in the galaxy." Within hours, the alien shuttle docked with New Horizon Station. Jake waited in the main docking bay along with Chief Engineer Lisa Brooks and Admiral Pete Collins, who had arrived from Earth as fast as possible. The airlock opened with a soft hiss and 3 aliens stepped through. Zektar was even more impressive in person. He was nearly 7 feet tall, moving with graceful steps that seemed to float across the floor. Behind him came a shorter alien, wearing what was clearly military armor. This one had darker blue skin and carried himself like a soldier. "This is Commander Vex Hari, our military attaché," Zektar said, gesturing to his companion. "He leads our defense forces." Admiral Collins, a gray-haired man with kind eyes but a firm handshake, stepped forward. "Welcome to our station. We're eager to learn about your confederation." "And we are curious about your species," Zektar replied. "Humans are unique. Most races we encounter are afraid when they first see our ships. You seem more excited than frightened." Lisa Brooks, a small woman with bright red hair and oil-stained work clothes, grinned. "We've been wondering if we were alone in the universe for a long time. Finding out we're not is the best news we've ever had." Commander Vex Hari spoke for the first time. His voice was deeper than Zektar's, more serious. "Your enthusiasm is noted. But you must understand, the galaxy can be dangerous. There are rules that must be followed, standards that must be met." "What kind of standards?" Jake asked. "Military standards," Vex Hari replied. "Every race that joins the Confederation must prove they can defend themselves and contribute to galactic security. We have brought something to show you." The aliens led the humans to the station's main cargo bay, where they had set up a viewing area. Through the transparent aluminum windows they could see out into space where the alien ship waited. "Observe," Vex Hari said, pressing a device on his wrist. A section of the alien ship opened, and something huge emerged. It was a giant robot, 40 feet tall, painted in dark blue and silver. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head like a warrior's helmet. Weapons were mounted on its shoulders and arms. Even from a distance it looked incredibly powerful. "This is an Apex-class battle mech," Vex Hari explained with obvious pride. "The Void Crusher. It represents the finest military technology in the Confederation." The giant robot moved through space with surprising grace. It flew toward a large asteroid that was drifting nearby. The humans watched in amazement as bright beams of energy shot from the mech's weapons. The asteroid, which was the size of a city block, simply vanished in a flash of light. "Impressive," Admiral Collins said, quietly. The mech continued its demonstration. It fired different types of weapons, each one destroying targets with frightening ease. It moved like a dancer, spinning and diving through space while never missing a shot. Energy shields flickered around it, protecting it from debris. The Void. Crusher is piloted by our finest warrior. Vexhari continued. It can destroy entire fleets of smaller ships. No enemy has ever defeated one in battle. Lisa Brooks was staring at the mech with wide eyes, but not with fear. She looked like a child seeing the best toy ever made. How does it work? What kind of power source does it use? How do you control something that big? Zektar seemed surprised by her questions. You are not afraid? Afraid? Jake said, still watching the mech as it finished destroying another asteroid. That's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He turned to look at the aliens. The engineering alone must be incredible. How fast can it move? What's its range? Commander Vexhari looked confused. These are military specifications, why do you ask? Jake smiled, and his smile was the kind that meant trouble. Well, I was just wondering, do you think our pilots could give it a try? Maybe we could have a friendly competition? The cargo. Bay fell completely silent. Even the soft hum of the station's life support system seemed to stop. Zektar and Vexhari stared at Jake like he had just suggested jumping out of an airlock without a spacesuit. Competition? Vexhari repeated slowly. Sure, Jake said, his smile getting bigger. Your mech against our best pilots. Nothing. Serious, just a friendly test to see how we measure up. Danny Hayes, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. Captain, if I may, I'd love to try piloting that thing. It looks like the ultimate challenge. Admiral Collins was trying not to laugh. Lisa Brooks was practically bouncing on her feet with excitement. Oh, this could be fun. I wonder if we could build something to compete with it. Zektar looked at Vexhari, who looked back at Zektar. Both aliens seemed completely lost. In all their years of showing their military might to other species, no one had ever asked if they could play with the weapons. This is not a game, Vexhari said carefully. These are instruments of war. Everything's a game if you have the right attitude, Jake replied. Besides, what better way to test our capabilities than a friendly competition? You get to see what humans can do, and we get to see how your technology works. Everyone wins. Ambassador Zektar was quiet for a long moment studying the humans. Finally he spoke. This is most unusual, but perhaps instructive. Very well. We will arrange a limited demonstration. One of your pilots may attempt to operate a training version of our mech. Excellent, Jake said, clapping his hands together. When do we start? As the aliens began discussing the details of their unusual request, none of them realized that this moment would change everything. The Confederation had shown their battle mechs to dozens of species. All had been impressed. All had been intimidated. Only the humans had looked at the most advanced military technology in the galaxy and asked, can we play with it? And that, more than any weapon or warship, would prove to be humanity's greatest strength. The news spread across Earth faster than wildfire. Within 6 hours of the first broadcast, every major news network was talking about the same thing. Aliens had arrived, they had giant robot warriors, and somehow the humans had challenged them to a competition. In the underground military complex beneath Colorado Springs, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Walsh was having the best day of her career. She had spent 15 years as a test pilot, flying experimental aircraft that most people thought were impossible. Now she was being asked to do something even more impossible. Let me understand this correctly, she said, looking at the video footage of the alien mech for the 10th time. We're going to compete against a 40-foot-tall robot from outer space. With what exactly? General Robert Stone, a large man with white hair and tired eyes, leaned back in his chair. That's what we're hoping you can figure out, Amy. The President wants our best people on this. The whole world is watching. Amy nodded slowly. She had always loved challenges, but this was something else entirely. I'll need a team. The best engineers, the best pilots, and access to everything we have. Done, the general said. Whatever you need. Within 24 hours, Amy had assembled her team at Edwards Air Force Base in California. The hangar was buzzing with activity. as some of the smartest people in America worked together on the impossible project. Danny Hayes arrived first. The young pilot had been at the space station when the aliens came, and he couldn't stop talking about their mech. "Colonel Walsh, I've been thinking about this nonstop. The way that thing moved, it wasn't just flying, it was like it was dancing." "Good observation," Amy said. She had chosen Danny for exactly that kind of thinking. He was young, fearless, and saw things differently than older pilots. Carlos Rivera came next. The engineer was 45 years old, built like a football player, and had designed some of the military's most advanced vehicles. He carried a tablet computer and was already sketching ideas. "I've been studying the video footage," Carlos said without even saying hello. "Their mech is incredibly advanced, but I think I see some things we can improve on." "Improve on?" Amy raised an eyebrow. "Carlos, that thing destroyed asteroids like they were soap bubbles." "Sure, but look at how it moves." Carlos pulled up the video on his tablet. "It's smooth, predictable, beautiful, but predictable. And look at the weapons placement. Everything is symmetrical, balanced, very alien thinking." The last member of the team was Dr. Rebecca Stone, the general's daughter, and one of the smartest people Amy had ever met. Rebecca was 32, thin as a rail, and had 3 degrees in physics. She wore thick glasses and always looked like she was solving math problems in her head. "The neural interface is the key," Rebecca said as soon as she walked in. "I've been analyzing the brief glimpse we got of their control system. It's incredibly sophisticated, but it's designed for their brain structure, not ours." Amy gathered her team around a table covered with printed pictures, computer screens, and coffee cups. "All right, people, let's break this down. What do we know?" "Know their mech is faster and stronger than anything we have," Danny said. "We know their weapons are more powerful than ours," Carlos added. "And we know their technology is hundreds of years ahead of ours," Rebecca finished. Amy smiled. "So we're going to lose?" "Hell no," all 3 of them said at the same time. "Good answer," Amy laughed. "So how do we win?" Carlos was the first to speak. "We don't try to match their technology. We use ours differently. Look, their mech is designed like a classical warrior. Sword, shield, honor, all that stuff, but we don't fight like classical warriors." "What do you mean?" Amy asked. "I mean we fight dirty," Carlos grinned. "We use tricks, surprises, things they won't expect. Their mech is built for formal combat. Ours should be built for survival." Rebecca was nodding excitedly. "And the neural interface problem might actually work in our favor. Human brains are more adaptable than most species. We learn faster, adjust quicker. Plus," Danny added, "I've been extreme sports my whole life. Rock climbing, base jumping, motorcycle racing. I'm used to controlling things that want to kill me." The next week was a blur of activity. The aliens had provided a training mech, a smaller version of their war machine. Danny spent hours every day learning to control it while Rebecca analyzed how the neural interface worked. "This is amazing," Danny said after his first successful test flight. He was sweating and exhausted, but grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "It reads your thoughts, responds to your emotions, but it's also trying to keep you safe all the time." "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked, making notes on her computer. "Safety protocols," Danny explained. "The mech won't let you do anything too dangerous. It's like having a very careful parent watching over you. Every time I try something risky, the system fights me." Carlos looked up from his own work. "That's it. That's their weakness." "Safety protocols?" Amy asked. "No, predictability," Carlos said. "Their whole system is designed around rules, protocols, standard procedures. Everything has to be done the right way, the safe way, the approved way." While Danny learned to pilot the alien mech, Carlos and his engineering team worked on humanity's answer. They called it the Iron Phoenix, and it looked nothing like the elegant alien machine. Where the alien mech was smooth and symmetrical, the Iron Phoenix was rough and uneven. It had extra armor on one side, larger weapons on the other. One arm was longer than the other. It looked like it had been built by someone who didn't know the rules of proper design. "It's ugly," Amy said, looking at the prototype. "It's supposed to be ugly," Carlos replied. Beauty is predictable, ugly is surprising. The Iron Phoenix had weapons the aliens had never seen. Instead of elegant energy weapons, it had kinetic harpoons that could grab enemies and throw them around. It had explosive charges that could be deployed as mines or used as emergency boosters. It even had a rapid deployment shield wall system that could create cover anywhere. Will it work? Amy asked. I don't know, Carlos admitted. But I guarantee the aliens won't know what to do with it. Meanwhile, Rebecca made a breakthrough with the neural interface technology. I've figured out how to modify the system for human brains, she announced during one of their late-night meetings. We can make it more responsive, less restrictive. Less safe, you mean? Amy said. Exactly, Rebecca smiled. The alien system is designed to protect the pilot. Ours will be designed to let the pilot do whatever they want, even if it's stupid. And humans specialize in doing stupid things that somehow work out, Danny added. As the day of the competition approached, word came that the aliens were watching human preparations with growing concern. Commander Vex Hari had sent reports back to his superiors about human behavior that worried him. They do not follow proper procedures, he had written. Their approach to engineering is chaotic. They break fundamental design principles. Their pilots practice maneuvers that should be impossible, but Ambassador Zektar was intrigued rather than worried. He spent hours observing human preparations, trying to understand their thinking. They are fascinating, he told Vex Hari. Every other species we have encountered tries to copy our methods. Only the humans ask why we do things the way we do. It shows a lack of respect for proven techniques, Vex Hari replied. Perhaps, Zektar mused, or perhaps it shows something else entirely. The night before the competition, Amy gathered her team for a final meeting. They were as ready as they could be. Danny had mastered the alien control system and learned to work around its safety protocols. Carlos had built a mech that broke every rule of proper design. Rebecca had modified the neural interface to give human pilots abilities that, frankly, scared her a little. Tomorrow the whole galaxy is going to be watching, Amy said. They expect us to lose. Hell, we'll probably lose, but we're going to make sure they remember how we lost. Or how we won, Danny said quietly. Amy looked at her team. They were tired, stressed, and running on coffee and determination. They were about to face the most advanced military technology in the galaxy, with a machine that looked like it had been built in someone's garage. You know what? Amy said. I think we might actually have a chance. Outside the hangar, the Iron Phoenix stood ready for its first real test. It was ugly, ungainly, and completely unpredictable. In other words, it was perfectly human. The competition was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn something new about the species from the small blue planet at the edge of the Milky Way. They were about to learn that humans didn't just use technology, they reimagined it. The neutral moon Kepler 442b had been chosen as the competition site for good reasons. It was far from any inhabited worlds, had low gravity that would make mech combat more interesting, and had terrain that would challenge even the best pilots. The moon's surface was covered with deep canyons, floating rock formations, and areas where gravity worked differently than normal. Ambassador Zektar stood in the command center that had been built specially for the competition. Through the large windows, he could see both teams preparing their machines. The Valorian mech Void Crusher looked exactly as it should, perfect, elegant, and deadly. The human machine looked like someone had built it from spare parts found in a junkyard. I still do not understand their design choices, Commander Vex Hari said, shaking his head as he watched the Iron Phoenix being prepared for battle. It appears to be falling apart. Perhaps that is intentional, Zektar replied. He had been studying human behavior for weeks now, and he was beginning to think these creatures were far more clever than they appeared. Admiral Pete Collins and diplomat. Helen Carter represented Earth in the final negotiations. Helen was a small woman with gray hair who had spent 30 years making deals between countries. She was known for being very good at getting what she wanted without making people angry. Let's go over the rules one more time, Helen said, sitting across from the alien diplomats. 3 challenges: precision targeting, obstacle navigation, and combat simulation. Points are awarded for speed, accuracy, and style. Correct, Zektar agreed. Each challenge tests different aspects of mech piloting skills. Helen smiled politely. We'd like to request a few small changes to the rules. Vexhari's eyes narrowed. What changes? First, we'd like permission for pre-battle reconnaissance. Our pilots should be allowed to study the courses before competing. That seems reasonable, Zektar said after thinking for a moment. Second, we'd like to allow non-standard equipment modifications as long as they don't change the basic power levels of the mechs. This made Vexhari uncomfortable. What kind of modifications? Admiral Collins spoke up. Nothing major, just small changes to help our pilots adapt to your technology. And third, Helen continued, we'd like the right to choose our pilot after seeing each course, rather than having one pilot do all 3 challenges. Both aliens stared at her. You want to use different pilots for each challenge? Vexhari asked. If we choose to, yes, Helen said calmly. But that is... Vexhari struggled for words. Honor demands that a single warrior prove their worth. 1 pilot, 1 machine, 1 test of skill. Helen tilted her head slightly. I understand that's your tradition, Commander. But the rules don't actually forbid using different pilots, do they? Zektar was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. No, they do not. It is simply that no one has ever asked to do such a thing before. Well, we're asking now, Admiral Collins said with a grin. The aliens agreed to all 3 requests, though Vexhari clearly didn't like it. What they didn't realize was that the humans had just gained 3 major advantages. The human team arrived at the competition site in a transport ship that looked almost as odd as their mech. Out stepped not 1 pilot, but several. Danny Hayes was there, but so were 2 others. Kevin Palmer was a former Air Force sniper who had retrained as a mech pilot. He was tall, thin, and had the kind of patience that came from spending hours waiting for the perfect shot. His specialty was precision targeting, and he could hit things that other people couldn't even see. Maria Santos was completely different. She was short, muscular, and moved like a cat. She had been a champion in something called parkour, which involved running and jumping through obstacle courses as fast as possible. She had learned to pilot mechs the same way she did parkour, by finding paths that other people thought were impossible. The third pilot was Tony Adams, a former mixed martial arts fighter who had become famous for winning fights that everyone thought he would lose. He was built like a tank, had scars on his knuckles, and looked at the alien war mech like it was just another opponent to beat. 3 pilots? Vexhari asked when he saw the human team. We like to have options, Captain Jake Morrison replied. He had come to serve as team coordinator, along with Dr. Rebecca Stone and her tactical analysis computers. The Valorian champion was ace pilot Rathmore, and he was everything an alien warrior should be. He was tall, proud, and had won more battles than any other pilot in the Confederation. He wore his medals on his chest and carried himself like someone who had never lost a fight. This is not honorable, Rathmore said, when he learned about the human team approach. A true warrior faces all challenges personally. Different cultures, different approaches, Jake said diplomatically. We respect your way of doing things and we hope you'll respect ours. The first challenge was precision targeting. The course required hitting moving targets at various distances while the mech itself was moving through a complex flight pattern. Points were awarded for accuracy, speed, and efficiency. Rathmore would go first, as was proper for the defending champion. He climbed into the Void Crusher and began his run. The alien mech moved like liquid silver, flowing through the course with perfect grace. Every shot hit its target exactly in the center. Every movement was textbook perfect. When he finished, the scoreboard showed 847 points out of 900 possible. Excellent performance, the judges announced. A new personal best for ace pilot Rathmore. The aliens were pleased. The humans were taking notes. Kevin Palmer climbed into the Iron Phoenix and immediately began adjusting controls that the aliens didn't even know could be adjusted. Rebecca Stone had modified the targeting system to work more like a sniper rifle than a space weapon. "This will be interesting," Zektar murmured. When the signal came to start, Kevin didn't follow the approved flight path. Instead, he took a route that looked completely wrong. He moved in sharp, aggressive patterns that would have been impossible for most pilots to handle. The mech jerked and spun in ways that made the alien observers wince, but every shot hit its target perfectly. Kevin's approach was completely different from Rathmore's smooth style. Where the alien pilot had been graceful, Kevin was brutal. Where Rathmore had been predictable, Kevin was chaotic. He used the mech's momentum to help his accuracy instead of fighting against it. He took shots that shouldn't have been possible and made them look easy. When the course ended, the scoreboard was quiet for a moment. Then the numbers appeared. 891 points. The aliens stared at the score in disbelief. The humans had not only matched their champion, they had beaten him. How? Vexhari asked quietly. Dr. Stone was studying her readings from the human mech's performance. Kevin used techniques that your safety protocols wouldn't allow, she explained. The Iron Phoenix let him take risks that the Void Crusher wouldn't permit. But those risks should have caused him to miss his targets, Vexhari protested. Should have, yes, Rebecca agreed. But Kevin has been taking impossible shots his whole career. He's used to making risks work in his favor. Rathmore was staring at the human mech with a mixture of respect and confusion. Your pilot is skilled, he admitted, but his methods are unconventional. We get that a lot, Jake said with a smile. The second challenge was obstacle navigation. The course was a three-dimensional maze of moving barriers, unstable platforms, and sections with no gravity at all. The goal was to get through as fast as possible without touching any of the obstacles. Rathmore went first again. His approach was methodical and careful. He studied each obstacle before moving past it, calculated the safest route, and executed his plan with military precision. It was textbook perfect, and he completed the course in 14 minutes and 23 seconds. Maria Santos was already grinning as she climbed into the Iron Phoenix. This is going to be fun, she said. What happened next made the alien observers question everything they thought they knew about mech piloting. Maria treated the obstacle course like the ultimate parkour challenge. She didn't go around obstacles. She went over them, under them, and sometimes through them in ways that seemed to break the laws of physics. She deliberately destabilized platforms to gain momentum, used walls for leverage in ways that made the engineers cringe, and took shortcuts through spaces that were barely large enough for the mech to fit. Several times the aliens were sure she was about to crash, but somehow she always pulled through. She's going to destroy the mech, Vexhari said, watching Maria use a moving barrier as a springboard to launch herself across a gap that was supposed to be navigated carefully. She knows what she's doing, Jake said, though he sounded a little nervous too. When Maria finished the course, her time was 11 minutes and 47 seconds. She had not only beaten the alien champion, she had made it look easy. Impossible, Rathmore said quietly. Not impossible, Maria said as she climbed out of the mech. Just different. The final challenge was combat simulation. Both mechs would face waves of automated drones in increasingly difficult scenarios. This was where Valorian superiority should really show, since it was exactly the kind of formal combat their mechs were designed for. But as the humans had already proven twice, should was a word that didn't seem to apply to them. The real competition was just beginning. The combat simulation arena was the largest space on the moon base. It was a huge room filled with obstacles, hiding places, and floating platforms. Automated drones of different sizes and weapon types would attack the mech in waves, getting harder and more numerous with each round. Commander Vexhari felt more confident about this challenge. Combat was what Valorian mechs were built for. This was where their superior technology and centuries of military experience would finally show the humans their place. This is where we will see true skill, Rathmore said, as he prepared for his run. He had been beaten in the first two challenges, but those had been tests of unusual techniques. Combat was different. Combat was about honor, discipline, and proven tactics. The Void Crusher entered the arena like a silver god of war. Rathmore's approach was everything the Valorian military had taught for generations. He moved with purpose, conserving energy and ammunition. He targeted threats in order of danger, eliminated them efficiently, and maintained perfect formation discipline even when fighting alone. The first wave of drones came at him from multiple directions. Small, fast attack drones with laser weapons. Rathmore destroyed them methodically, his plasma cannons picking off targets with mathematical precision. Not a single shot was wasted. The second wave was harder. Medium-sized drones with shields and heavier weapons. Rathmore adapted his tactics, using his mech's superior mobility to stay out of their firing range, while picking them off one by one. His energy management was perfect. He never used more power than necessary. The third wave brought the heavy combat drones. These were almost as large as a mech, with thick armor and weapons that could seriously damage even the Void Crusher. This was where most pilots failed, but Rathmore was not most pilots. He used cover intelligently, divided the enemy force and eliminated them through superior positioning and firepower. Wave after wave came at him. Each one was harder than the last. Some had special abilities, stealth drones that could turn invisible, explosive drones that tried to ram him, support drones that repaired other drones while he was fighting them. Rathmore handled them all with textbook perfection. When the simulation ended, he had lasted through 12 waves and destroyed 247 targets. His final score was 1,247 points, a new record for the combat simulation. The alien observers were pleased. Finally, their champion had shown what Valorian military science could accomplish. The humans might be clever with their tricks and unusual methods, but in real combat, proven techniques would always win. Excellent work, Zektar told Rathmore, as the ace pilot climbed out of his mech. That performance will be remembered in the military academies for years to come. Rathmore nodded with satisfaction. The humans are skilled, but they lack proper military training. This is where experience matters. Tony Adams was stretching his shoulders as he prepared to enter the Iron Phoenix. The former fighter looked relaxed, like he was getting ready for a workout instead of the most important battle simulation in galactic history. "You sure about this, Tony?" Jake Morrison asked. Rathmore just set a new record. The pressure's on. Tony grinned. "Jake, I've been in cage fights where guys twice my size tried to break my bones. A bunch of robot drones? That's just Tuesday. For me." Dr. Rebecca Stone was making final adjustments to the Iron Phoenix's combat systems. "Remember, Tony, this isn't like your other fights. You can't just punch your way through everything." "Can't I?" Tony asked, flexing the mech's mechanical hands. "These things look pretty solid to me." Rebecca stared at him. "Tony, you're not seriously thinking about using the mech's hands as weapons, are you?" "Why not? They're big, they're strong, and I bet these alien drones aren't expecting to get grabbed." Jake Morrison looked at the Iron Phoenix's unconventional weapon loadout. Unlike the Void Crusher's elegant energy weapons, the human mech had a collection of devices that looked like they belonged in a construction site rather than a battlefield. Kinetic harpoons, explosive charges, deployable shields, and various tools that Carlos Rivera had insisted on including. "Remember the plan," Jake said. "Use the environment. Be unpredictable. Make them react to you instead of the other way around." Tony nodded and climbed into the mech. The neural interface connected with his mind, and suddenly he could feel every part of the machine as if it were his own body. The sensation was incredible, like being 40 feet tall and armed with weapons that could level buildings. The arena reset itself for the second run. Fresh obstacles appeared. New hiding places emerged from the floor, and the drone deployment systems prepared for another battle. "Begin simulation," the computer announced. The first wave of attack drones came at Tony exactly as they had come, at Rathmore. Small, fast, numerous, and armed with laser weapons. But Tony's response was completely different from anything the drones had been programmed to expect. Instead of using the mech's ranged weapons, Tony charged straight at the nearest group of drones. Before they could react, he grabbed 2 of them in the Iron Phoenix's hands and smashed them together like cymbals. Then he threw the wreckage at other drones, knocking 3 more out of the sky. What is he doing? Vexahari asked in disbelief. Fighting, Jake said simply. The drones tried to adapt to this new threat, but their programming was designed for ranged combat against an opponent who followed military doctrine. They had no idea how to handle a mech that treated them like opponents in a bar fight. Tony used everything around him as a weapon. When a group of drones tried to surround him, he grabbed a piece of debris and used it as a club. When they tried to attack from above, he jumped up and punched them out of the sky. When they tried to use cover, he simply smashed through the cover to get at them. The second wave brought the medium drones with shields and heavier weapons. These should have been a serious challenge, but Tony treated them like puzzle toys. HFY figured out that their shields only worked against energy weapons, so he started throwing things at them. Rocks, pieces of destroyed drones, chunks of the arena walls, anything he could grab became a projectile. One drone tried to hide behind a barrier. Tony simply picked up the barrier and hit the drone with it. This is not proper combat technique, Rathmore said, watching in fascination and horror. No, it's not, Admiral Collins agreed. It's street fighting. And Tony's very good at street fighting. The third wave of heavy combat drones should have been where Tony's unconventional approach finally failed. These drones were designed to fight mechs. They had thick armor, powerful weapons, and sophisticated targeting systems. Tony looked at them for a moment, then did something that no military manual had ever suggested. He grabbed the nearest heavy drone and used it as a shield while attacking the others. When that drone was too damaged to be useful, he threw it at another drone and grabbed a replacement. He's using their own units against them, Rebecca said, staring at her tactical displays. The drone's friend or foe systems are getting confused because he's holding one of their own units. Wave after wave came at Tony, and he handled each one with the same brutal creativity. He used environmental hazards that weren't supposed to be weapons. He turned the drone's own tactics against them. He made the arena itself fight on his side. When stealth drones appeared, he started throwing debris randomly until he hit something invisible. When explosive drones tried to ram him, he grabbed them and threw them at other targets before they could detonate. When repair drones tried to fix damaged units, he used his harpoon system to drag them into combat range and dealt with them personally. The aliens were no longer commenting on proper technique. They were just watching in stunned silence as Tony turned their perfectly designed combat simulation into something that looked like a demolition derby. How many waves has he survived? Zektar asked quietly. 15, Rebecca reported, and he's not slowing down. Tony was grinning inside the Iron Phoenix. This was exactly like the cage fights he used to love, except bigger and with better toys. Every wave of drones was just another opponent to figure out and beat. Wave 16 brought something new. Coordinator drones that could direct the others and adapt their tactics in real time. These should have been able to counter Tony's chaotic fighting style by imposing order and discipline. Tony looked at the coordinator drones for a moment, then started systematically hunting them down while ignoring everything else. Once he eliminated their leadership, the other drones went back to their basic programming, which Tony had already figured out how to beat. Impossible, Vexahari whispered. Tony finally reached the 20th wave before the simulation ran out of challenges to throw at him. He had destroyed 312 targets using methods that violated every principle of proper mech combat. His final score was 1,289 points. As Tony climbed out of the Iron Phoenix still grinning, the arena looked like a war zone. Pieces of destroyed drones were scattered everywhere. Several walls had holes punched through them. The floor was covered with debris that hadn't been there when the simulation started. That was fun, Tony said, stretching his arms. Can we do it again? Rathmore stared at the human fighter with something approaching awe. Your methods are completely without honor, he said slowly. They violate every principle of civilized warfare. Tony shrugged. Yeah, probably. But they work. The competition was over. By the narrowest of margins, the humans had won. The scoreboard showed the final results in bright blue numbers that seemed to glow in the dim light of the command center. Humans, 2,247 points. Valorians, 2,234 points. a difference of only 13 points out of more than 4,000 possible. The room was completely silent. No one seemed to know what to say. The humans had won, but it felt like something much bigger had just happened. Ambassador Zektar was the first to speak. "Congratulations," he said to Captain Jake Morrison. "Your species has achieved something remarkable today." "Thank you," Jake replied, "but I think we all learned something here." Commander Vexihari was staring at the Iron Phoenix, which still looked like it had been built from spare parts. "I do not understand," he said slowly. "Your technology is inferior. Your methods are unconventional. By all logical analysis, you should have lost." "Maybe logic isn't everything," Dr. Rebecca Stone suggested. She was studying the data from all 3 challenges on her tablet computer. "Our pilots didn't try to be better than yours. They tried to be different." Rathmore walked over to Tony Adams, who was sitting on a bench drinking water and looking completely relaxed. "Your fighting style," the alien pilot said carefully. "It has no honor, no discipline, no respect for proper combat. Doctrine." Tony looked up at him and grinned. "Nope, but it got the job done." "That is what I do not understand," Rathmore continued. "How can methods that are wrong still be effective?" "Maybe they're not wrong," Tony said. "Maybe they're just different. Your way works great for your people. Our way works great for us." Admiral Pete Collins was talking quietly with Ambassador Zektar near the main viewing window. "I have to ask," Collins said. "How many other species have you shown your battle?" "Mechs to? 47, Zektar replied. "We have demonstrated our military capabilities to every species that has joined the Confederation." "And how many of them asked if they could compete with your mechs?" Zektar was quiet for a moment. "None. You are the first." "The first to ask, or the first to want to try?" "Both," Zektar admitted. "Most species are impressed by our technology and accept their place in the galactic order. A few are frightened and submit immediately. But none have ever looked at our most advanced weapons and asked if they could play with them." Collins smiled. "That probably tells you something about humans." "Yes," Zektar said thoughtfully. "It does." Commander Vexhari approached the group, still looking confused by everything he had witnessed. "I must ask," he said to Jake Morrison, "why did you not simply try to copy our technology? Every other species attempts to replicate our designs." Jake thought about the question for a moment. "Because copying something that already exists doesn't make it better. It just makes it the same." "But our technology is superior," Vexhari protested. "Your technology is more advanced," Jake corrected. "That's not the same thing as superior. Advanced means it's complicated and powerful. Superior means it's the best possible solution to a problem." Dr. Rebecca Stone joined the conversation. "We looked at your mech designs and asked ourselves, what problems are they trying to solve? Then we asked, are there other ways to solve those problems? And apparently there are," Carlos Rivera added, walking over from where he had been examining the Iron Phoenix. "Your mechs are built for formal warfare between organized military forces. Ours are built for survival in chaotic situations. Neither approach is wrong," Amy Walsh said. "They're just designed for different purposes." Ambassador Zektar was listening to this conversation with growing fascination. "You did not see our mechs as something to fear or copy. You saw them as something to learn from." "Exactly," Jake said. "We figured out what you were trying to accomplish, then tried to accomplish the same things in our own way. And your way," Zektar said slowly, "is based on unpredictability, adaptation, and using whatever resources are available." "Pretty much," Jake agreed. "We're not as strong as you, not as advanced as you, and we don't have centuries of military tradition, but we're good at making things work even when they shouldn't." Vexhari was shaking his head. "This changes everything. If your approach to technology is truly effective, then our entire military doctrine may need to be reconsidered. Or maybe," Zektar suggested, "we need to learn from each other." The idea that came out of that conversation would change the galaxy forever. Instead of the humans simply joining the Confederation as junior members, they would become partners, in developing new technologies and tactics. Within a week, the first joint human-Valorian engineering team was formed. Danny Hayes, who had learned to pilot the alien mech so quickly, was paired with Valorian engineer Nexara to study how human neural patterns could improve mech control systems. Kevin Palmer began working with Valorian weapons specialists to develop targeting systems that combined alien precision with human adaptability. Maria Santos started training Valorian pilots in what she called impossible navigation, finding paths that shouldn't exist and using them anyway. Tony Adams became the most requested instructor in the Confederation. Military academies that had taught the same combat doctrines for centuries suddenly wanted to learn about chaos fighting and environmental warfare. But the most important change was in how the different species thought about technology itself. The Valorians had always believed that there was one best way to solve any problem: find it, perfect it, and use it forever. The humans showed them that there might be dozens of ways to solve the same problem, and the best solution might depend on who was doing the solving. We call it the human approach, Zektar explained to the Galactic Council 6 months later. Instead of asking, what is the right way to do this, they ask, what are all the possible ways to do this? It is a fundamentally different way of thinking. The Confederation's military capabilities increased dramatically as human-style innovation spread to other species. Ships that had been designed one way for centuries were suddenly being redesigned with human input. Weapons that had remained unchanged for generations were being improved with human modifications. But the most significant change was cultural. The Confederation had been a stable, ordered society where everyone knew their place and followed established procedures. The humans brought chaos, questions, and the dangerous idea that just because something had always been done one way didn't mean it was the best way. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral, stood on the bridge of the new joint research station New Olympus. Through the main view screen, he could see human and alien engineers working together on projects that neither species could have accomplished alone. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. He turned to see Ambassador Zektar approaching with what looked like a formal document. "What's that?" Jake asked. "A request from the Galactic Council," Zektar replied. "They want to establish a new department of the Confederation, the Department of Alternative Solutions. They want humans to lead it." Jake looked at the document. It was a formal request for humanity to teach other species how to think like humans, how to question established methods, how to find new solutions to old problems, how to turn chaos into advantage. "They want us to teach the galaxy how to be human?" Jake asked. "Not exactly," Zektar said with what might have been a smile. "They want you to teach the galaxy how to think like humans. There is a difference." Jake thought about the competition that had started all of this. 3 human pilots with unconventional methods, an ugly mech built from spare parts, and a willingness to try something that had never been done before. "You know what?" Jake said, signing the document. "I think we can do that." As he handed the document back to Zektar, Jake looked out at the stars and smiled. The Confederation had shown humanity their most advanced battle mechs, expecting submission or fear. Instead, they had gotten a question that changed everything. Can we compete with them? The answer, as it turned out, was yes. But more importantly, the question itself had been the real victory. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about never accepting that things couldn't be improved, couldn't be changed, couldn't be done better. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their weapons or their technology. It was their refusal to accept that anything was impossible, and that, more than any battle or any mech, would reshape the future of every species among the stars.